What is the scariest thing that happened to you? Posted one day ago. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. My ex is an angry drunk. One night we got drunk for our mutual friend's birthday. The birthday girl and her boyfriend started getting in a big fight, so we separated them. While doing that, we got separated and couldn't find each other. I found him after about an hour. He was pissed. I took birthday girl home and didn't care about him being at the bar alone with her boyfriend. So he punches my car windshield out and chases me into the house. He catches up to me and pulls me by my head down to the floor, proceeds to put one hand over my mouth and one hand around my neck. I remember nothing but begging for him to let go. Every second felt like a lifetime without air. On top of him, sitting on top of me, and the crying I was doing. I never thought I'd ever beg for my life like that. I was literally saying shit like, "Please, just take your hand off my mouth. I'll do anything, please, I can't breathe." Eventually, he just snapped out of it and let go in self-pity. OMG, what am I doing? And I ran upstairs to my roommates as he chased me again to try to not let them know what happened. Luckily, I got to them in time, and they called the police. I was in a car accident when I was 16. Lying asleep in the backseat of the family van, had a seatbelt on but only the lap part and adjusted pretty loosely. I woke up to a random shaking, jiggling movement, had a few seconds of confusion, realized we were still driving, thinking that it'll be fine, can't be a big deal of course. Shaking suddenly gets a lot worse. We're fishtailing all over the road, then in an instant, everything is sideways. Adrenaline kicks in, and the next few seconds seem like minutes and are burned into my memory forever. I'm floating in midair as the van rotates around me. There are several things floating with me, a book, some coloring pencils, a small box. Then the van turns, but I keep going in the same direction, head first into and through a closed window. Now I'm hanging half out the van window as it rolls, and I can see trees and sky, and then the road coming toward my face at a rapid pace. Memory blacks out at that point. Next thing I remember is waking up, thinking that, well, this is fucked up. Open my eyes, and I can only see a line of light a few feet away from my face with some background trees, people's feet walking past, thinking that something's really wrong now. Turn my head slightly to the ground, and it's red, like deep red. Up till this point, I'd been kind of worried, mostly in shock, but now I'm scared. I go to stand up and realize that, apart from moving my head, I can't move at all. The moment there is the most terrified I've ever been. Finally start to scream. I don't realize, but I'm trapped under the upside-down van, like completely underneath, and it's crushing me. Scream more. I don't know for sure how long it takes for bystanders to realize where I am, lift the van and pull me out, but it's a minute at least. A decent amount of time to be trapped under a rolled vehicle with your face pressed into a pool of your own blood, which is beyond terrifying. The next couple of hours are pretty bad too. After I'm pulled out, my parents are right there. Luckily nothing major is damaged, but I'm bleeding severely. They can't find my brother though, which is also terrifying. Turns out he walked off in shock and is just standing in the crowd on the roadside watching, so he gets found pretty quick, but holy shit man. Got my first helicopter ride, sweet. The shocks kept coming though. My face is severely lacerated, and while they were cleaning the road out of it in the ER, they had a lot of local anesthetic in it and were like pulling back pieces of remaining skin to clean under it. I remember looking up at one point and seeing the roots of my eyebrow from the inside, which now is neat, but at the time made me freak out. My knees were pretty cut up too and were getting the same treatment, and there was a moment they got to cleaning a part of the anesthetic hadn't reached, and all of a sudden it felt like I was being repeatedly stabbed in the leg. After they cleaned me up and were waiting for surgery prep, there was a moment where I was alone in the ER room. I felt thirsty, and for some reason, figured I'd just go get some water. Went to stand up and, of course, legs don't work. Fall on my face, more blood all over the place, straight back to terrified in a flash. Luckily, the hospital had a decent plastic surgeon on staff at the time, so I didn't need the skin graft from my thighs or butt onto my face that they were considering, thank God. If the other kids at school had found out about that, geez. Was in hospital for 8 days. Couldn't ride in a car for several months without having a panic attack every time we went round a corner due to the momentum change causing a flashback. Anyway, I'm fine now. People don't even notice the scars anymore, but yeah, that was scary. I woke up around 3 a.m. one night to loud tapping outside my bedroom window. My bedroom was in the basement of our house. I assumed it was raccoons or something trying to get into our neighborhood's shed. After listening for a while longer, I managed to fall back asleep. In the morning, I brought up the noise to my mom, who said she had heard a similar noise coming from that same side of the house, only she got out of bed and went to the front living room window to investigate. What she saw was a man emerge from between our house and our neighbor's place. He stopped in front of our home, took a long look before removing a pair of latex gloves, and then proceeded to walk down our street. I assume he was testing for weak spots or something, and luckily didn't manage to make it inside that night. Turning over my 11-month-old daughter and discovering that she is dead. She died 3 months ago of acute asthma attack brought on by a chest infection. She was not previously diagnosed with asthma. I had taken her to the doctor that day, was sent home with antibiotics. She fell asleep and I had a video audio monitor on while she was sleeping. Emotionally groomed by a teacher at 15, he told me how he was going to get revenge on the admin or past students he felt wronged him and take care of the boys who were mean to me. A few days later, he told the class, "If you see me with a gun, run." I realized he had intentions to shoot up our school and kill for me. I was taken in to talk to cops, not because I reported anything, but because several students noticed we were close. I was terrified I'd show up and he'd be there and hurt me. I didn't realize till I was 18 I was groomed. There were rumors they found stashes of guns in his house, but I don't know if that was true. I want to clarify, I want the primary motivation for the shooting, but it was clear that he intended to hurt the kids who did shit to me once everything came out. My abusive ex-husband came home drunk and tried to choke me to death. It felt like forever. I couldn't get words out. I kept just trying to hit his arms as hard as I could and try to roll to get out from under him. I ended up passing out briefly and woke up coughing and gasping, and he just went off to bed. I honestly had no idea what to do. I ended up taking myself to the hospital because I couldn't even talk or breathe without pain. I was still at the point where I was too scared to tell people about the abuse, so I insisted this injury happened from something else, even though the nurse or doctor knew this couldn't have happened by accident. So I went home to him. He apologized profusely, and I stayed married to him for a couple more years before I left. I now have PTSD from that relationship, but I am definitely doing way better in life. Still attempting to get divorced, but after it's done, I will not have to see or hear from him again. Truck swerved into my lane going highway speeds this last winter and smoked us. My wife, 3 kids, and dog were in the car. The scariest part wasn't the impact or the realization that we were about to get fucked. It was the brief moment of stunned silence after, the moment I turned around to see if everyone in my family was okay. Thankfully, my kids escaped with no injury. My wife had to undergo surgery for internal bleeding, but ultimately recovered and is great today. And my sweet, lucky old dog, somehow, he survived getting tossed around in the trunk. Fell asleep in the living room watching TV. Wake up around midnight to my dad walking past me. He heads to the side door, unlocks it, and starts walking to the chicken coop. By the time he's outside, I'm up and following after him, calling out in a whisper, "Dad, what are you doing?" No response. I think maybe he can't hear me despite being only a few steps behind him. Dad walks into the chicken coop and I lost sight of him for about 2 seconds. I walk into the chicken coop and it's empty. I'm very confused now. There is only one door for the coop and I'm standing in it. Suddenly there's a hand on my shoulder. I almost jump out of my skin and whirl around. It's my dad. He heard me walking outside, had followed after me trying to call out my name, but for some reason I hadn't heard him. 10 months ago, when I heard a crash in the bathroom my husband was in and he didn't answer me when I called out asking if he was okay. Called 911 as I struggled to get the door open. Got in, found him face down. I rolled him over and he exhaled for the last time in my arms. I tried to breathe for him, compress his chest, but I already knew he was gone. And in that moment, it was like a bomb exploded in the middle of my life. It's scary when you've lost your person, your love, the most important thing in the world to you. When your life changes in an instant. I went from being a happy wife to a 31-year-old widow with an uncertain future in the blink of an eye. This would be super scary now, but for 6-year-old me this was terrifying. I was out hiking with my Cub Scout group and I was trailing behind. I fell, slipped a couple of feet down a hill and got my leg caught under a log. It was only the start of the hike and it was pretty long, so I was terrified that I'd be stuck there for almost 2 hours. This is Canada during bear season. They came back after about 5 minutes. Present me would have known that probably would have happened, but that was terrifying for 6-year-old me. I have been shot at, attacked by a dog, and even survived a horrible car accident on a major freeway. None of that has come close to the sheer levels of panic of this one morning after my girl partied and got drunk. I work graveyard, 4 10-hour shifts. I fucking hate it. Anyways, I had just gotten home and the sun was barely rising, just enough to faintly illuminate the room. I'm handling my side of the bed and I go to look at my girl, fast asleep, cute snore and everything. I look away for half a second, look back, and she is stone-faced, nothing but pupils, staring into my soul. I legitimately jump back so far that I hit my head on the bedroom door. Waking her up from said sleep, I was shaking for like a minute straight, and it was the first time ever that I had hyperventilated in my entire life. When I was about 4, I was living with my grandmother and my aunt, who was only about 10 at the time. My mom was married to an abusive man, and for a time they lived with us. Being as young as I was, I can't tell you why my grandmother allowed him to live with us at all. I imagine that she didn't realize he was abusive until he'd been living with us for a while. Regardless, she did eventually throw him out of her house once it became clear that he was no good, and my mother, of course, went with him, but they came back, not to move back in, but to pick up something they'd left. Someone they'd left. Me. It was nighttime. My 10-year-old aunt pulled me out of my room and snuck me down the hallway towards the bathroom while my relatives screamed at each other downstairs. The details are fuzzy and I can't remember who all was there, but I feel like it was at least my grandmother, my mom, and possibly my other aunt. I don't know why. I just feel like she was there too. I also can't remember if our abuser was waiting in the car or if he went in with my mother. Anyway, my aunt locked us in the bathroom, making sure to keep the light off in the childish hopes that if the light was off, they wouldn't know we were in there. But of course they did, and eventually, my aunt was coaxed into opening the door, and I found myself sitting in the back seat with a very scary man giving me a very scary, smug grin. Honestly, hiding, confused, and scared in that pitch-black bathroom, listening to the muffled yells of my family and the terrified whispers from my aunt as she told me that they wanted to take me away, but they couldn't if they couldn't find me. I don't think anything else that happens to me in my life will ever top that night. I came home after school senior year one day to find my gran wasn't there. Got a call from her aide at the time to tell me she'd had a massive blood sugar spike. It hit 800 at one point and had had a stroke while being taken to the hospital. She was in the hospital for a bit before being taken by helicopter to a better hospital in a bigger city, and her doctor apparently told the aide it looked like it was going to be a one-way trip. His words exactly, because he was low-key an asshole. I got to see Gran once before she was taken, and she was very out of it. She spent a couple of weeks at the hospital, during which time the school somehow got wind of it and all called me into the office where a CPS, DHS, I can't remember which it was, worker, the principal, and the guidance counselor sat me down to discuss the possibility of my older brother being removed from our home and put into a facility because our gran, aka legal guardian, wasn't home to be with him. They seemed to think that even though I was a legal adult, 18, with a part-time job and plenty of money on hand to keep us both set in Gran's absence, and he was a legal adult, 19, fully capable of taking care of himself while I was gone at school or work every day, the fact he had Asperger's meant they felt he was unsafe at home without me there to hold his hand every second of the day. So I was not only facing the very real prospect of losing my gran, but also of having my brother taken away. I might argue with him sometimes, and I don't always like to be his keeper, but I'll be damned if he gets shoved in some group home against his will when he can take care of himself perfectly fine. Luckily, Gran came back from the stroke miraculously well, a little weak on one side, but otherwise fine. They never took my brother away, though I had to report to the principal just about every day that he was doing all right, and Gran's aide had to make constant trips by the house to check on him and document how he was doing before the CPS DHS people were satisfied. I've never experienced fear like that before, and I never want to again. When I was around 8 or 9, I was out hiking in the mountains with my uncle and brother who was riding his bike. He started getting bored, so he decided to ride back to camp. We were on our way back. About 5 minutes after he left, we came around a bend and were maybe 30 feet from 2 adult grizzly bears. We stopped dead in our tracks, had a quick stare down, and then they took off into the trees. After standing there stunned for maybe 10 seconds, 2 park rangers came out of the trees, asked if we saw any bears, and then took off in the direction we pointed them in. After the brief exchange, my uncle remembered my brother ran ahead and started panicking. He picked me up. I was never a big kid, maybe 50 pounds at the time, and ran all the way back to camp to find my brother sitting there. The look of panic on my uncle's face will haunt me till I die.